What is money?
In this particular episode, we'll be discussing and looking at what exactly is money in Islam. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he specifically states that there is no one definition or criteria to define money and currency in Islam. That's in his Majmu' al-Fatawa. The Hanafi school are also very, very clear on this. If you look at Imam Kasani rahimahullah's work called Bada'i al-Sanai and other books as well, this is just one reference, but the same kind of idea and language is found across the classical works of the Hanafi school, where they mention that when it comes to defining, recognizing a currency, it's down to the people, down to ta'amul and istilah. These are the two words the scholars use in the Arabic language. Ta'amul, which is like common usage, and istilah, social congruence, where people agree that this is, or they come to some kind of understanding, this is the medium by which we will exchange and understand what value is. This will be the bridge asset between two different assets. So to move away from barter trading, we are using this particular bridge to exchange, to make things easier. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah in his Al-Mughni, well, Al-Mughni is not his, but Ibn Qudama, quoting Imam Ahmad rahimahullah's view in Al-Mughni, mentions that the view of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah was that it's also down to the people. And he mentions that if people were to agree on something as currency, is there any issue in that? So he mentions la ba'sa bih, that there's no issue in that. People can agree to use whatever medium they want to be their kind of medium of exchange. It suffices to say that you can have ta'amul and a social practice or community practice, which is organic and from bottom up, that people begin. That's currency can be developed like that. And that's how currency developed in the past. Many currencies that we had in the past, whether it was grains, wheat, barley, salt, stones. In the island of Yap, they had these stones that they were using, big stones. These were things which gained currency amongst the people. And so slowly, it became the norm and standard. So standards were developed by the people themselves, and people accepted it as the go-to for the monetary standard. What the other methodology that's there to determine currency is top-down, where the government will decree that this is your currency. Now, because they have this authority of everybody, they decree that this is the currency. The urf is established immediately, because the idea of urf is to establish practice. Practice can be established slowly amongst people, and it becomes that practice is agreeable. People conform with the practice. That can take a lot of time. Another way is the government themselves, when they give a ruling and decree, that is a ruling, that it becomes the urf. And now that is what is meant. That is the mashrut, al-ma'ruf kal-mashrut. It becomes the kind of go-to, and it becomes binding upon people. In fact, the government can, when it comes to things which are mubah, the government can make certain things binding. So in that instance, the fiat currency, when it's decreed by the government, that's more of a top-down development of urf. Okay, so this is how currency develops. Yeah, when it came to governance, though, although Sharia is left to the people, there is a discussion in the classical books of fiqh which discusses the right of minting. Who has the right of setting the monetary policy and setting a monetary standard? Is it the right of the government, or is it that anybody can make their own currency? Imam Nawawi rahimahullah in his Rawdat al-Talibin is very clear on this, that it's the right of the government. The private sector cannot mint and issue its own money. Rather, it's the right and function of the government to bring stability. And that makes absolute sense because it's all about stability. Now, in those times, if you think about it, if anyone and everyone could start minting their own coins without any kind of oversight and governance, it could have a lot of issues and concerns. People could cheat one another. So Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he issued a fatwa at that time saying, no, it's only the government which has this particular function. With the development of fiat money and the impacts that we're seeing in certain countries of how is hyperinflation, fiat money is losing its value. The question is raised that what's the role? Is it that the government as a body set monetary policy from a Sharia perspective, or is a function of governance the core? Is it government or is it governance? What's the real guidance? Because in those times, was it possible to have a system which provided governance without the government? That was the question, I guess, that was being looked at. And potentially, no, in that time, the only thing that, the government was the most authoritative body and they would be providing governance. So this is where the question comes in. That is it government or governance? Were the scholars more concerned with governance, and that's why there's not so much emphasis among scholars that it's like the money is only that which the government decides? Or is it about governance, where people are left to themselves? If they can govern themselves in a particular way, they can set their own monetary policy. And so this is where the ideas amongst scholars, amongst researchers, academics, economists, they differ. And what we find in the earlier, like Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, the Hanafi scholars that we quoted, it seems like the idea is, as a principle, it's down to the people. If the people assemble themselves in a particular way and they hand over the responsibility of monetary policy to the ruling party or the government, then it becomes that function of the government. If they don't, if it's just amongst themselves, they want to organize themselves differently, then that's up to them as well. So there seems to be some flexibility in that discussion, but nowadays it's something which typically people have just handed over to the government to decide for them how to go about the monetary policy. That when it comes to governance, is it governance per se or is it government? How does it work? And this is just a debate and discussion among scholars, and there's different scholars with different views, but everybody agrees there's a need for governance. There's no denial of that. There's a need for a form of governance, or at least some guidance in making sure people's wealth is preserved. Now, what are the characteristics of money in Sharia? This is the core of our discussion. And what are the core features? And so in here, we just want to explore some of the ideas that we have in Sharia and some of the things that we can reflect on when looking at the guidance in Sharia when it comes to money. Some of the characteristics are as follows. It's only a medium of exchange. It's not to be traded like commodities. Money should be liquid. Money requires governance. There should be no debasement or manipulation of money. The idea of hard money seems to be optimal in Sharia. It's a unit of account. It's a store of value. There's a network effect with money. Supply should be limited. Money should be something divisible and portable. Money flows and circulates. So the first thing is, in Islam, money is only a medium of exchange. I think this is one of the core ideas that must be understood. Number two, again, similar idea that number one is a medium of exchange. Number two is it should not be traded like commodities. This is where, look, Imam al-Qayyim, his quote comes that in I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, when money begins to be treated as a commodity and becomes the objective of transactions, the entire system will become corrupted and in crisis. Number three, the third thing that we look at when we look at Sharia and we understand from the prohibition of riba al-fadl is the idea of money being something liquid. Why? Money has to be liquid because only that thing which is liquid is something which people will accept and use, and people will readily accept because they can use it elsewhere. Number four, governance. We mentioned this that the classical scholars were very much concerned with oversight and governance of money to protect it from manipulation. As such, the authorities were seen to be the guardians and caretakers to maintain order and public welfare by being in public service. So here it is, no debasement or manipulation. Coin clipping and debasement is not permitted in Sharia for both the general populace as well as the authorities. The Sharia deems this as corruption, exploitation, and economic manipulation. Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad, and most of the Jews of Medina state that it's prohibited, even when there is a supposed need or necessity to do so. This is eye-opening. Need and necessity permit even the prohibited matters to an extent. The famous Islamic principle states, necessity permits the prohibited temporarily, right? Number six, this is an idea of something being hard money from the Sharia. How do we understand that? So from a Sharia perspective, anything can be a means of payment in a transaction. And that's why we use the word thaman. Thaman just means payment. It doesn't mean gold, silver, or anything like that. It just means the mode of payment and what the payment is. That's thaman, it's just payment. The classical fiqh books discuss how currencies other than gold and silver were not deemed to be money in the true sense. It was gold and silver that were the standard, unit of account, and medium of exchange, and a true form of money. That's why they use the word nuqud typically to mean gold and silver, and the idea of these are what stipulated always to be money. That's why in a transaction, if you have gold and something else, by default in Sharia, the gold becomes the payment, okay? Because it's got the monetary elements to it, the monetary features to it by default. So there's an idea within Sharia that gold and silver have this natural tendency to function as money. They have that natural, that's why even the fuqaha and classical jurists, when discussing gold and silver, they use the word thaman khilqatan. They use the word natural money when it comes to gold and silver, indicating to the fact that these metals naturally possess and are embedded with, by Allah, the qualities to function as a medium of exchange. They have the properties, gold and silver. So whatever is desirable for a system or for a monetary system, gold and silver have that within them. That's why they were termed and labeled as thaman khilqatan. And so this concept in gold and silver are arguably, well, gold especially, hard money. What does that mean? Hard money is that money whose supply is hard to produce. So you can't just simply make more of it. So if you look at gold, it's held its value over centuries due to its hardness that it possesses. It's very hard to bring new units into circulation and increase its supply without cost and effort. Number seven, the unit of account. This is something which has been mentioned by scholars. They use the word miqyas in the classical books of fiqh, that money is what's known as miqyas, that it's a unit of account, it's a store of value. And when it's a unit of account, what we mean by it's the standard, it's a tool to actually understand the price of things. Number eight, being a store of value. I guess this is something which is, again, obvious and also common knowledge, as well as something which contemporary economists also agree, that money functions as a store of value. How do we understand that from the Sharia perspective? Well, we know from the maqasid al-Sharia, preservation of wealth, hifdhul mal, is one of the core maqasid and objectives of Sharia. How can you preserve wealth? One of the core methods of preserving wealth is having money which actually maintains wealth over long term, right? And stores value. If you have money which doesn't store value, how is that aligned with the maqasid of Sharia? How is that preserving your wealth in the long term? You're not. You're continuously fighting to preserve wealth. So money in Islam should function truly as a store of value, long term, and maintain value and preserve value. Number 9 is this idea of network effect. Money is a result of a network. It is a medium amongst people and a networking instrument. It allows communication and flow of information amongst people to fulfill their needs. As such, the Islamic jurists state that money is something which the people themselves agree and use, where there is social congruence. So this idea of istilah that the fuqaha mentioned, as I mentioned, Kasani and others have discussed, this gives an idea of network effect, that it comes as a result of people connecting, networking, and exchanging ideas or economic value, of being engaged with one another. So money is a result of a network effect. Money brings a community together to function in a particular way. Limited supply. This is something which we touched upon, but from the Sharia guidance, we can appreciate and understand that money should be something that is limited in supply. The first thing is, the Sharia talks about gold as being something which is khilqatan. It's natural money. Because it's limited, it's the scarcity in there, that's one of the key ideas. It naturally possesses all the key elements for money, such as scarcity, limited supply, mass appeal, high stock to flow ratio. Also, one of the reasons why debasement is prohibited is because currency devaluation or debasement leads to inflation, where the amount of money in circulation relative to economic activity increases artificially. And that's also problematic. Number 11, being divisible and portable. Again, this is quite obvious, but it's also from the guidance of Sharia. We understand this, that the Messenger of Allah himself recognized gold and silver and engaged with gold and silver. In the time of Medina, it was very common to use this. It fulfills the needs of people. It facilitates pricing, and it was something which the Sharia itself has many kind of legal cases in the books of fiqh, which are based on portability, divisibility. It's based on the idea of breaking something down into smaller pieces and units to fulfill different tasks. That's why we have many thresholds in fiqh which are based on smaller denominations. So the idea of having denominations of a particular currency, it's in the fiqh, and being divisible and portable is just a natural need for money. The final kind of element and characteristic of money is circulation. Islam has an entire philosophy on money, and of course it would, as money is a fundamental element of an economic system. And so the importance of sound money in the economy is like healthy blood to the body, as we mentioned earlier. If there's something seriously wrong in an economy, it could very well be that the monetary policy is the root and rot of the problem. Money must flow. It must circulate like how blood must flow.
The government issues bonds and then sells them to the central bank, who buys them with newly created money, or, in other words, the check for the government debt. What we now call money, or more precisely the monetary base, is created by the fact that the two institutions exchanged paper or digital records. Each asset purchased by the Fed increases the monetary base. Government bonds are interest-bearing, so it is necessary to pay interest on each bond issued. This is called debt service. In order to pay for an existing bond, the government usually just issues some new bonds. This doesn't seem to be reasonable at all, does it? Imagine if you borrowed some money and spent it all at once. Now suppose that you took another loan to pay off the previous debt, even though you were still paying interest. This is called rolling over debt. Although the face value of the loan is never repaid, the periodic interest is. This procedure is listed among other budgetary items as the cost of servicing debt.
You deposit your money at the bank and they give you a small amount of interest. Then, they take that money and lend it to people and businesses while charging a much higher interest rate. The difference between the interest they charge on their loans and the interest they pay you is the profit that the bank makes. This is why banks are willing to pay you interest for your deposits. In order to lend more and make more money, banks need to attract more money from deposits because deposits create loans. But aren't the banks supposed to be keeping your money safe somewhere so that you can take out your money when you need it? Well, sort of. Banks have a unique system called fractional reserve banking, which basically says that only a fraction of deposits, usually around 10%, need to be held in cash and they can loan out the rest. This amount is set by the Federal Reserve and acts as a cushion for when customers want to withdraw cash from their account. Now here's where the money-making magic comes in. Let's say you deposit $10,000 into your savings account. If the reserve requirement is 10%, the banks must keep $1,000 and can lend $9,000 out to another customer. Now, you have $10,000 in your account, another customer has $9,000 in cash, and suddenly, your $10,000 deposit turned into $19,000 worth of money. Then, that other customer deposits their $9,000 at their bank, which again holds onto 10% of it and lends out the rest, and so on and so on. You see where this is going. This is how banks increase the money supply, otherwise known as the total amount of money in circulation.
The surprising fact is that most of the money in the UK is created by banks. Like a magician, banks make the money appear, seemingly out of nothing, whenever they make loans. But this money is not what it seems. This money is credit and is temporarily on loan from the banks. We use it as money. We believe that it is money. But because it is credit, at some point in the future, it has to be paid back. And when it is paid back, it disappears. Banks make their profits by charging interest on loans. So as long as they're confident in the economy, they want to lend as much as possible. More loans and mortgages means that more money is created.
So we can see here that fiat money doesn't even exist like the money we know from before, i.e. like gold or silver or even like Bitcoin. Something actually exists in of itself that we can actually transact. Fiat money is a promise to pay back something. It's a debt. It is a debt tool. And then we have the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, naha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam an bay' al-kali' bil-kali'. The Messenger of Allah forbade from selling a debt for a debt. So transacting in fiat money is actually transacting in a debt. So every time we do money transfer, money exchange, all that kind of stuff, you actually just exchange one debt for another debt, which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam specifically said, you cannot do that. You cannot exchange a debt for a debt. You can see here that the whole system from its root and from its core is evil and it's wrong and it's haram and it's not even really even money. So in saying that, hopefully now you've understood why I believe that every Muslim needs to transact and move away from riba at all costs, even if it means holding gold or silver or Bitcoin. Even if the volatility of it is high or whatnot, it is better than what we have here from riba.
So the value of today's money actually comes from a legal status given to it by a central authority, in this case, the government. And so the trust model has changed from trusting something to trusting someone, in this case, the government. Fiat money has two main drawbacks. One, it is centralized. You have a central authority that controls and issues it, in this case, the government or central bank. And two, it is not limited by quantity. The government or central bank can print as much as they want whenever needed and inflate the money supply on the market. So if money today is digital, how does that even work? I mean, if I have a file that represents $1, what's to stop me from copying it 1,000,000 times and having $1 million? This is called the double spend problem. The solution that banks use today is a centralized solution. They keep a ledger on their computer which keeps track of who owns what. But there were many attempts to create alternative forms of digital currencies. However, none were successful in solving the double spend problem without a central authority. Whenever you give anyone control over the money supply, you're giving them enormous power, and this creates three major issues. The first issue is corruption. power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The second issue of a centralized system is mismanagement. If the central authority's interest isn't aligned with the people it controls, there may be a case of mismanagement of the money. For example, printing a lot of money in order to save a certain bank or institution from collapsing, as what happened in 2008. The problem with printing too much money is that it causes inflation and basically erodes the value of the citizens' money. The last issue is control. You are basically giving away all control of your money to the government or bank. At any point in time, the government can decide to freeze your account and deny you access to your funds. In October of 2008, a document was published online by a guy calling himself Satoshi Nakamoto. The document, also called a white paper, suggested a way of creating a system for a decentralized currency called Bitcoin. This system claimed to create digital money that solves the double spend problem without the need for a central authority. At its core, Bitcoin is a transparent ledger without a central authority. But what does this confusing phrase even really mean? Well, let's compare Bitcoin to the bank. Since most money today is already digital, the bank basically manages its own ledger of balances and transactions. However, the bank's ledger is not transparent, and it's stored on the bank's main computer. You can't sneak a peek into the bank's ledger, and only the bank has complete control over it. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is a transparent ledger. At any point in time, I can sneak a peek into the ledger and see all of the transactions and balances that are taking place. The only thing you can't figure out is who owns these balances and who is behind each transaction. This means Bitcoin is pseudo-anonymous. Everything is open, transparent, and trackable, but you still can't tell who's sending what to whom. Bitcoin is also decentralized. There's no one computer that holds the ledger. With Bitcoin, every computer that participates in the system is also keeping a copy of the ledger, also known as the blockchain. So if you want to take down the system or hack the ledger, you'll have to take down thousands of computers which are keeping a copy and constantly updating it. Like most money today, Bitcoin is also digital. This means there's nothing physical that you can touch in Bitcoin. There are no actual coins. There are only rows of transactions and balances. When you own Bitcoin, it means that you own the right to access a specific Bitcoin address record in the ledger and send funds from it to a different address. So, what does all of this mean? Why is Bitcoin such big news? Well, for the first time since digital money came into existence, we now have an alternative to the current system. Bitcoin is a form of money that no government or bank can control. Bitcoin also cuts a lot of the middlemen from the process of transferring money. This means that in many cases, Bitcoin is cheaper to use than traditional wire transfers or money orders. Also, unlike fiat currencies, Bitcoin was designed to be digital by nature. This means you can add additional layers of programming on top of it and turn it into smart money. But
what is the Islamic ruling on cryptocurrencies? What is the Islamic ruling on cryptocurrencies? So last year, the Fiqh Council of North America dedicated a significant amount of time to talk about cryptocurrencies in our meeting, in our annual meeting, and we went over this issue in a lot of detail, and by unanimous consensus, we issued a fatwa. To be more precise, we will be issuing a fatwa within a week or two, but the fatwa has been finalized. I have drafted, the initial draft is just going to be circulated amongst the other members and then released inshaAllah ta'ala maybe by next month after Hajj. But it is unanimous, we all agree. Cryptocurrencies, firstly our fatwa is about Bitcoin only, not about all of the currencies, because every currency has its own ruling. The general ruling is that we did not find any reason to prohibit cryptocurrency, and therefore it remains at the default, and the default is that everything is halal unless proven otherwise. So we looked at every single criticism of cryptocurrency, and we looked at a number of fatwa committees around the globe. Some of them said it is haram, some of them said it is halal, and we looked at this in detail. And from us in North America, we concluded that none of them raised objections to the level that it makes it haram. So they said, for example, there is no value to cryptocurrency. And the response to this is value is relative. Value is relative. What you find valuable, others find valuable. They said, of the objections, they said there's no government that backs it. The response is, you don't need to have a government to have some. So all of these, we looked at every objection after the other, and we came to the conclusion, there is no issue that will make cryptocurrencies haram in general, and Bitcoin specifically, we looked at, and we said it is halal to mine it, it is halal to invest in it and buy and trade in it.